before we jump into today's episode, I've actually got a really big announcement. This is the first time that I'm going to be mentioning that I've created a training course on how to build websites that get great organic traffic from Google. And if you want to learn more about that, you can go to nichepursuits.com/training. Again, that's nichepursuits.com/training. And the reason I bring it up is because in today's interview, I actually am talking to Jason Wilson. He works with me as my full-time employee. He is going to be one of the coaches, and Jake Kane is going to be the other coach as part of the training course that I'm doing. And so you're going to have 3 coaches in that training course. It's going to dive into all the details of how you can rank your site quickly in Google and get that free organic traffic. The doors are not quite open yet, but I wanted to give you a heads up. If you want to learn more about that, you can go to nichepursuits.com/training. Thanks a lot. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Niche Pursuits podcast. I'm your host, Spencer Hawes from nichepursuits.com. And today I'm doing a guest interview, although it's a little bit different because I'm actually sitting down with Jason Wilson, who has been on previous podcasts as a co-host, but I thought it was time to dive into his story. Even though he's been on a few podcasts, I don't think we've actually shared his history, his journey online, and it's an interesting one, so I wanted to do that today. So with that, Jason, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, man. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. It's a little bit different because you've been a co-host. You've asked questions of other people and their stories, right? But we've never had you specifically on. So I think it should be interesting.
It should be. Absolutely. And it's not like we don't go a ways back or anything ourselves. So
not at all, right?
Right.
So of course I know your story. So the benefit of this story is for the listeners. Just so people are aware, Jason and I do have a long history way before I started blogging online, all that sort of thing. So back in Arizona in 2005, I believe it was, something like that. We both were working in the banking industry where we worked at Wells Fargo Financial, doing a lot of phone sales, essentially financial products over the phone. And Jason and I worked in a really small office. What was there? 5 or 6 people usually in the office.
Yep. About 5 or 6 people. Yep.
So probably a pretty intimate office. We got to know each other really well, worked there for a couple of years together. And so that really is our background. And we've stayed in touch ever since, really. So it's been 13 years that we've known each other. So I'd like you to kind of share your background, your history. Yeah. You've been in the financial industry for a long time. You can touch on that maybe a little bit, but really, how did you get started online building websites?
Sure. Before I jump into that, I do want to say I specifically remember back in 2005 when you and I would have, we would be closing the branch at night. We'd be having late night debates. And this was back when you were just starting to talk about building businesses online. And I remember you specifically talking about websites and that you had ideas that you were going to do something with either coins or with, you even thought that you found something to do with worm farms. So I just want to throw that out there because I specifically remember us having those conversations well over 10 years ago. So.
Well, it's very true. Those were a couple of my first niche sites was worm farms and nickels.
Yeah.
Is one that I built a niche website on. And I do also remember showing you one of my very first websites. You may not remember it, but I remember showing you, maybe it was just the logo. I don't remember, but I showed you something from one of my very first websites, would have been back in like 2006 or something, before I had made a dime online.
Yep, I remember. And I remember thinking like, this guy is either going to make it big or he is absolutely crazy and he's going to be doing exactly what we're doing right now, just like me. So
I'm happy to say that it worked out.
Yes, I agree.
And so everybody, knows my story. It took a while before I quit my job. I started 2006 showing Jason Wilson my early day websites, but it wasn't until 2011 that things really started to take off and I was making enough money to quit my job.
Yeah.
You, on the other hand, took you a little bit of time before you started building websites. Me showing you my worm farm stuff didn't quite convince you right away. So what was your journey to eventually starting something online?
So I remember I was working in banking. I had worked through various positions. And when I first started following your stuff was back in about 2013 was when I started following your blog. We reconnected through Facebook, and it was just one of those things where I saw you and you listed it, your employer as, Niche Pursuits CEO owner. And so I flipped over to the blog and started reading your stuff. And I was managing a team in sales at the time. And I thought, hey, man, this would be a cool way to just learn to do something online. And after reading your story, I was like, man, like if Spencer can do this, I know if I put in the work, I can eventually learn to do it too. So
like Spencer's not that smart. If he can figure it out, like surely.
No, not at all. It was more along the lines of like, this is super inspiring and what a cool thing to do. Like, I think my initial thought, like my first 30 days was, hey, just establish a site that might make you a little bit of extra income as something fun. Like this could be a hobby and not necessarily something that's I wasn't thinking big at the time. I was just thinking something fun. And then probably about 4 months in, after reading your stuff in depth and hearing success of other people who followed you, I was like, why can't I build a business? Why limit myself to just, a couple $100 a month as something that can make a car payment or something like that? Like, why not think about building a larger business and see what that does?
So how long did it take you to find some success? How long did it take you to start making, $200-$300 a month, something like that?
Yeah. So I have it written down on my whiteboard, and I started following you. I formed my LLC in May of 2013.
Nice.
I think I started following you a couple months before that. So I wrote it down the day that I wanted to basically start my own business and start my own site. And then I think that year, so my first site was horrible. I didn't even know what web hosting was when I started my LLC. Like I was still, I use that term a lot because I was still trying to figure out, like, just so your listeners and readers know, I had no clue what I was doing.
Right.
I didn't know what WordPress was. I didn't know what anything was. I literally had just started following your blog. And I really had to learn everything just from reading your blog, other blogs in the niche. And then I know I asked you a ton of questions.
I do remember this. Yes.
Yeah.
We connected, I think on Skype maybe, or maybe it's just emails, but.
Yeah. It was Skype. We connected, and then I shot you a ton of emails, and you were probably like, stop bothering me. You're emailing me too much.
I should go back and find some of those early day emails. That actually would be really interesting to read.
You should. I think for me, it didn't really click that you had your hands in so many other businesses, and I didn't understand the magnitude of like what Longtail Pro was doing for you and how much time you had to put into that business. So I just thought, hey, Spencer can respond to my emails anytime. And looking back now, I'm like, man, what an idiot. Like,
not at all, man. I actually do enjoy, to an extent, right, helping people out. I do enjoy helping people out a lot, but unfortunately, I don't always have a lot of time, so I can't get to everybody. Right?
Sure. And that was honestly, that a lot of that was just me. I didn't really understand like the magnitude of what you did, and like I didn't have like time respect boundaries, which I've obviously since developed. But yeah, so I followed you starting in 2013. That first year, I don't think I made a dime. That first year, from May until, I take that back. I think I made my first internet dollar probably in October of that year was when I got my first AdSense click. It may have been like September of October.
Mm-hmm.
And that was when I was like, okay, like it took me 4 or 5 months, but I finally got my first AdSense click. My first site I built, I should say within 6 months, it was getting like 1,000 hits a day, but I couldn't monetize it because of the niche that it was in. I couldn't use AdSense. It was not an AdSense approved niche. And so I was getting traffic. I knew what I was doing was working, but I couldn't monetize it in any way. And that site ended up crashing and burning in 2014 anyway. So it was kind of one of those like trial and error. I got traffic, couldn't monetize it, ignored the site, started a new one. And in early 2014, I was making a few $100 a month.
Nice.
So I think I'd started off making about $200 or $300 a month for my the first 4 or 5 months in 2014.
And this is with the new site that you created?
Yes, that's correct. I created a site in the fitness niche, and it was making a few $100 a month. And then I got sucked into the PBN craze like everybody did.
Right.
And
I didn't help with that at all.
no, not at all. And then that site took off and I was making good money. I was making 4 figures a month. And then everything crashed and burned after the PBN updates and all of that stuff. So I kind of started fresh around the time that happened. I kind of followed along with you and with Perrin and that journey. And when the PBN crash happened, I kind of started fresh with everything.
So let me dig into that just a little bit. I mean, that maybe for listeners, they're thinking, man, he worked really hard. He built up a site that was making 4 figures a month, but then it crashed and burned. He must have just been totally frustrated and not wanted to go on. But maybe you can talk about what did that 4 figures a month mean to you? I mean, even though it crashed and burned, was that income all along the way helpful?
The income along the way was absolutely helpful. And honestly, more than anything, it was a learning experience. So I look at all of that time. I mean, I even did an internship with No Hat Digital with Hayden Miyamoto's team. And learned how to build out PBN sites and how all that worked. And that I may have done that like sometime in late 2013. I'm a little fuzzy on all the dates just because it was a few years ago.
Yep.
But I definitely did an internship with him. And I look at that as like, people are like, man, you wasted all that time learning like these tactics that didn't, that are no longer relevant. Or if they're relevant, I know a lot of people still use PBNs, but like I've sworn off them. I don't use them. Around the time that you quit, I quit. Yep. And it's one of those things where, yes, you look at that as like, yeah, I put a lot of work in and I crashed and burned. But you got to keep in mind, I still had a really good day job income at the time. So for me, it was all experimental anyway. And I just chalked it up to, okay, like I know how to build links. I know that I can build links the right way when I stop doing this. And I know how to build a website. Like, within a year, I knew how to build a custom WordPress website when the prior year I had no idea how to set up hosting with with Bluehost at the time. Yeah. I had no idea how to do that. So for me, it was the income was helpful, but more than anything, I just chalked it up to like my first year, even if it was a wash, it was a huge learning experience and it set me up for where I'm at today.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's the way that I see it is every little mistake or pitfall that you might have, it really is a learning experience.
Yeah.
It's something that you can get more proficient at the craft, right? At figuring out how to build the business and make your websites work. And so that's a good attitude to have for sure. So you had your second site sort of crash and burn with the PBN update. How long did it take you to sort of pick up the pieces and build another site?
Well, so along the way, I had other sites that I had built that weren't PBN related, and those got sold. So I actually sold those and experienced a little bit of success. So I would say like
how much did you sell the sites for? Do you remember?
I think the first one I sold wasn't big. It was like 10,000, which is, I mean, that's a lot of money. Don't get me wrong, but it wasn't to the magnitude of like, what I could sell one of my sites for today.
Totally.
But back then it was a lot of money. So I had one site that I sold for about 10,000. And then I spent the next year building up another site in a different niche. And so this would have been 2014 and into 2015. I actually had one site that was the first like game changer money for me when I was like, okay, this is a big deal. I sold a site for about 40 grand. And
that's huge.
It is huge. Again, like looking at where I'm at now, I would go back and I would do things differently. I would have held on to that site and I would have grown it further because it had a lot of potential. But still, for me at the time, again, this was not my primary source of income. My day job income covered all of our living expenses and then some. So for me, having that extra 40K, I was like, man, like this is crazy. I can, if I want to, I can literally go out and just buy a car and pay for it in cash.
Mm-hmm.
Or I can, reinvest in, the stock market, or I have money that I don't need that I can do anything I want with. So that was kind of like the aha moment, really, I think in 2015, where I was like, okay, this is like life-changing stuff. And that's really when I dedicated myself to building what I would call today like an authority site and saying, I'm going to do this from scratch. I'm going to create a new one. And I think this is around the time I started my authority site was around 2015. And I said, I'm going to build this the right way. And I am going to try and grow it as much as I can and get to a point where this income could sustain my family and potentially use it as a way out of the corporate world.
Absolutely. And I want to dive into that new site or the new couple of sites that you have.
Yeah.
But you were about 2 years in, would you say, roughly, from
Yes.
when sort of you started to when you
Yes.
sold the site for $40,000.
Yes.
So can we estimate that site was making roughly what, 1,500
Yeah.
ish
And
dollars a
Empire,
month?
yep, Empire Flippers was the brokerage that facilitated that deal. So a shout out to them because it was a quick and easy deal. They made
Mm-hmm.
it pretty painless on me. And yeah, I would say that that's accurate. It was making about 1,500 a month. Whoever bought it though, got a sweet deal because I chalk this up to me being in corporate at the time, not having the time to really review what was happening. I sold it in September, and a lot of my revenue was coming from Amazon. And the
Mm-hmm.
site 4 months later, literally like traffic exploded and almost doubled.
Oh,
And they
wow.
were reaping the benefits of that during the holiday season. So if
Yep.
I had just
Added
held,
purchases. Mm-hmm.
like I easily could have probably sold that site for double what I sold it for. But that's again, learning experience, and I was happy to have the money at the time. So
Yeah, learning experience, and it's not a bad thing to sell a site for
no,
$40,000, right?
correct. And honestly, that may have been why it sold so quickly too, is that somebody saw
Sure.
the potential and they did some stuff that I couldn't have done or had the time to do at the time. And that's why I got the premium that I did. Cause I think I got over 30x when I sold it, which was a pretty big deal at the time.
Yep, at the time, I mean, they were trying to sell things for 20, 25x
Yep.
was sort of the
Yep.
standard. Yep,
Right.
even just a few years ago. Now,
Yep.
definitely the multiple is higher,
Correct.
which
Yep.
is good for us selling websites.
Yep.
So very interesting. So I do just want to reiterate that to people listening in, a year and a half, 2 years in, Jason's making pretty good money. I think that's a fairly good target for people out there. It probably is going to take a year of, learning the ropes, building your website, understanding how WordPress and hosting works and Google works. But once you get the ball rolling and understanding how it works, things can really multiply and go from there.
Yeah.
And so with your knowledge that you had, you decided, all right, I'm going to build another authority type site, a larger site with bigger potential, right? Maybe take us through that.
Yeah. So basically at that point, I decided, all right, I want to build a site that's quality. I'm going to start by producing like well-researched and in-depth content. So I went out and started hiring writers. I took some of the money that I made from what I sold my site from, the 40,000, and I literally earmarked like 10K of it. And I used that as like the seed money to start my authority site. And I went out and started hiring writers. And I also wrote some of the content myself where I had experience in the niche. And so I started that in, I don't know, at some point in late 2015. And then it took some time to build, probably not just because of the niche, but also because of I think just my time was relatively limited back then. And so I could have done a much better job of outsourcing. And honestly, I could still do a much better job of outsourcing today. There's a lot of pieces, like I'm not perfect, right? Like I'm still, for the most part, a one-man show. I do outsource my content. I've got a process for that, but I still could refine things better. And this site could have taken off a lot more. But back then, so I reinvested some of that money, found some writers, started producing content. I think I gave it like 4 or 5 months before I even decided to pick up an email and started building links and doing outreach for the site.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so filled it up with a bunch of content the first 3 to 4 months. Yep. Then slowly after that started building some links.
Yep.
When did you start to see the site kind of take off, gain traction there?
Yeah, I would say it started gaining traction in 2016. That was when it started producing, I don't know, about 500 to 600 a month. And it's funny because I would say the site probably took about 8 months to a year, somewhere in that range, where it was doing like $300 or $400 a month. And then it felt like it literally overnight went from $500 a month to like $1,200 a month. So the jump from 0 to 500 is always the hardest.
Yep.
And I found this true with my second site that I started last year. The 0 to 500 jump is always the hardest. And once you get from 500, the jump to 4 figures is far easier than it is from 0 to 5. So Yeah, so it took me about 8 months to a year before I started making $500 a month, $800 a month, somewhere in there, and it just jumped immediately to that 4-figure threshold, and it started to scale. So in 2016, again, this is because I was working corporate job, I didn't have as much time. It probably bounced between 1,000 and 3,000 a month for most of that year, and then again, and you'll have to forgive me because my dates are always a little fuzzy, but I can't remember what year it was that we had the Amazon commission cut. That may have been, I think that was like the end of 2016, beginning of 2017. And
that sounds about right.
Okay. So what happened was it was 2016. The site towards the end of the year was doing about 4,000 a month. So I had scaled, started doing about 4K. And then in the holiday season, I did like 9K. It was crazy. It literally doubled because of the old commission structure.
Wow.
And then I got whacked with my particular category, got cut by about 40%. And so my earnings dropped to immediately like back down to that 3 to 4K level because of the traffic normalization after the holidays, and because of the commission reduction, I was back to that 3 to 4K level.
Right. That hurts a little bit, right?
It does.
You see the big numbers and then it gets cut back and you're like, what happened? I had a good thing going.
Yep.
But at this point, rather than talk about how did you further increase the traffic, maybe talk a little bit about how did you get it to that point? I mean, 3,000 to 4,000 a month is a great website.
It is.
I know you started to do a lot more of outreach, link building.
Yeah.
Do you feel like that is kind of what helped to take off, or was it specifically the content or the keywords, or a combination of the both there?
I think it was a combination of the both. The keyword selection, obviously, you've been preaching that a long time, and that obviously still holds true today. You're not going to go out there and rank for something that, all these authoritative websites are ranking for if you don't have any links or credibility in your industry. So I found keywords that were definitely low competition. And I think that coupled with, so a couple of tips for your readers, like one of the things I did was if my page is ranking on page 1, but wasn't ranking like in the top 3, I started going back to my content during that time and thinking, how can I make this better? How can I improve it? So I started adding more images. By default, my content length would increase. And I'm not a fan of like just saying, hey, put out, 10,000 words of garbage just to put out 10,000 words. Like I would make sure if I was adding length to my content that it served a purpose. And I think that helped the keywords that my best content was ranking for. And it pulled me into the top 3 to 5 for specific keywords that I may not have been ranking for initially for those like pillar content.
So let me just clarify that. So
yes,
I find this strategy very helpful as well, going back and updating old content. But the content that you were looking at is specifically articles that were ranking or keywords that were ranking on the first page already, or maybe bottom of the second page.
Right.
Something like that, right?
Yeah. Anything that was like ranked position 15 to like position 8 or 9, I was going back and looking for those and saying, how can I make these better?
Yep.
And so I think that helped a lot. And then, yes, I got, so you could say, part of link building is luck. Like you have to do the work no matter what. Like you're not going to build links if you're not sending emails and not doing outreach and not building relationships. You're never going to get links. But I did get lucky and get a few really high quality links, which definitely helped my site. And then the rest of it was just numbers. How many emails can I send and what's my response rate? And so the links definitely help that. And I always refer to it as like links are kind of like horsepower, in my opinion. Like a site that's got no links is kind of like a Honda Civic. It's, you can keep producing really good content, and it might be really efficient and you might start to get some traffic because if your keyword selection is really good, I think any site can rank if the research is done well and you've got really, really good content and you've done your keyword research the right way, you can still rank. But obviously, when you start adding links, now you go from a Honda Civic to, Ford Mustang GT500, and now you can start, going after more competitive keywords and really start increasing the amount of traffic that you get.
And Jason rebuilds Mustangs, so he knows what he's talking about, guys.
Yeah.
So, no, I agree. Any specific tools that you were using to do all of this outreach? You know, do you have some fancy, you know, we talk about Ninja Outreach and, you know, other tools, or just everything manual?
I like manual, but that's because I think for my initial phases, I really focused on how can I do this myself and make it like, you know, how can I build these relationships, and how can I just zero in on it? And don't get me wrong, I'm working on refining and perfecting my own processes so I can scale. That's a conversation I think for maybe your more advanced site builders, like, you know, figuring out automation. But initially, and even today, when I find high quality link prospects, I just do it all manually myself.
And what kind of link prospects are you looking for? What kind of links mostly are you getting? Are you doing a lot of guest posting, resource pages? You know, what is it?
Yeah, resource pages are kind of my bread and butter. Broken link building is quality too, because you can generally find, you know, you can find links that are relevant to your content, and it doesn't have to be links that are necessarily relevant to your niche. So, you know, you could be in, I don't know, just make something up here. Like you could be in goodness, any niche really. Like you could be in food per se. And if you wanted to be in food, but you wanted to get links from somebody that's in the pet niche, like you could find ways to tie that in with broken links and just go back and say, hey, you know, I noticed on your dog blog that you have a broken link here. Well, I've got, this article on Starbucks puppuccinos for how they're, you know, bad for dogs. Would you mind replacing that with this link here? There's super creative ways that you can do broken link building. And so I would say broken link building is probably about 40%, but resource pages probably 50%, and maybe guest posts are like 10%. I don't do a ton of guest posts.
Right. Okay. No, that's good. So maybe I'll let you continue on with the story here a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know if we want to jump to where it's at today right now, but I want to get there eventually, right? So what's the site doing today? I mean, you talked about what was it, early 2016 or 2017?
Yeah, early 2017. Yes.
Yeah, it was making, you know, maybe $3,000-4,000 a month after sort of the Amazon commission update. So you're at $3,000-4,000 a month, and that's a year and a half ago, let's say, something like that, early 2017. Where is it today?
So today the site by itself is probably doing almost 5 figures a month on its own. It's not quite there yet. It's probably the gross revenue, like before my costs are subtracted, it's probably like in the 8,500 to 9,500 range, depending on the month.
That's huge.
It is huge. And
Congrats.
you know, thanks, man. I don't know what it will be like when we get into the holidays this year. I'm hoping for a nice uptick, but right now it's producing a good amount. And really the focus, I still do outreach. So, you know, I've got a process for that. I still do it myself. I don't have it outsourced, which again, I know there's probably plenty of more seasoned professionals out there that are going to say I'm dumb for not having it outsourced. And that's true. I need to work on my processes for that. And I am absolutely working through it. I've got templates set up. Let's put it this way. I've got my entire process built out. I just haven't found the right people to hand it off to yet. So it's coming, and it's coming very, very soon. And I'm confident with my processes that I've got lined up. It's just a matter of stacking the right people behind it. So
that's awesome. Yes. I'm looking at the SEMrush graph of your website. Unfortunately, readers won't get to know what your website is, but I know what it is. And it's a great website. It looks like in the last 4 months, at least according to SEMrush, the traffic has really increased quite a bit.
Yep.
Is that the case?
It is.
And what has happened in the last 3 to 4 months?
2 things. Lots more content. And this is just a little tip. I have started focusing a lot on Pinterest. So and again, I don't have to, and I don't know what's happening, honestly. Like I can tell you that I have scored some decent links to some key longer articles that I've published in the last few months. So that's definitely helped. But I've also noticed a bump because I've had a few of my posts have gotten like virally shared on Pinterest. And that has organically just improved my organic search results. Like one of the pieces of content it's on the bottom of page 1 now, and this may not be showing in SEMrush or Ahrefs, but it's ranked on the bottom of page 1. And when I published that piece of content with no links, it was ranked on, I don't know, somewhere in like maybe the 80s to 90s. So it was all the way back on page like 9 to 10. And I had built no links to it, and it got all the way to the top of page 2 before it scored its first link. And the only thing that I changed was that I started focusing on Pinterest, and it went viral. So I do think that external traffic of any type is a Google signal. And so I think that the Pinterest focus has helped, but I know that I've probably also gotten links as a result of my Pinterest focus. I think that they've just been collateral links that I've received without actually doing outreach, because other bloggers have seen my site or seen my content and then started linking to me organically.
Right. And then also your site is just aging more, and anytime it gets more age, more authority, it does get a little bit easier to start ranking your content.
Correct. Yep.
And
but there also has been lots of content published too, probably, 100,000 words in the last couple of months. So.
Okay, that's huge. So a lot of new content that will do it. But it is interesting to hear that Pinterest, whether it's the traffic coming from Pinterest or just whatever other signals that Google is seeing, it seems to kind of be going hand in hand with, hey, Pinterest is doing well. My organic traffic from Google is doing well. That's a pretty good thing. How long ago did you start doing Pinterest?
We started in June, believe it or not. I didn't even have a Pinterest account. And so just so folks know, my processes. So the biggest process I don't have nailed down right now is my outreach process. As far as my content and my like social, I literally outsource. I don't even understand how Pinterest works. Somebody referred to it as a search engine for images in our Niche Pursuits Insider group, and I think that's a great way to explain it to someone. But I'm being honest, I still don't understand how it works. I hired someone, I outsourced 100% of that. The only thing I do is create my own unique images every week. I go into Canva where my templates are stored, and I spend maybe 30 minutes a week creating 5 new pins for either my new content or my old content. That's all I do.
And then you turn it over to the Pinterest expert. They manage the account. They share it, do whatever, and sprinkle their magic on that, and it works. So June, that, just so people know, that's about 3 months ago. So Jason's been doing about 3 months on Pinterest. How much traffic specifically from Pinterest are you now getting?
I would say it ranges anywhere from 1,000 to 2,000 uniques a day.
That's huge.
Yeah.
And how much does your site overall total, including Pinterest? How much traffic does it get a day, roughly?
So I look at everything in page views, just because that's kind of my stat. Yeah. And I would say that right now the site's getting about 225,000 page views a month.
Okay.
So if you break that down over the course of the day, if you do the math on that, it ranges page view wise anywhere from 5,000 to 9,000 page views a day. So 5,000 is usually on my slower days later in the week, and then weekends, it's not uncommon for me to go above 10K.
Yep. So it looks like around an average of 7,500, something like that. That's huge, man. You've got a good site. Things are going really well. And we should probably clarify that this is still on the side, right? Yes. You still have a full-time job. Something happened there in early 2017?
That's correct.
And people should know, but let's tell people what happened.
Yeah. And so it's funny. There was a major trust factor because it was right after the Amazon commission cut. And then I actually accepted a job. I left corporate in February of 2017. I turned in my notice in February of 2017. I started with you in April of 2017. And came hand in hand with the commission cut. But I knew that even with the cut and where my traffic was, we were still going to be okay. Between what I make at Niche Pursuits and my sites, we're more than fine. So I made the jump. I left my corporate career back then and have been working for you ever since. So I do stuff for Niche Pursuits 40 hours a week, and then I do all my own stuff on the side.
Yep. Absolutely. So Jason has been my employee now for almost a year and a half, I guess, full time. And it's been great. You've worked on a number of different projects. You initially were brought in as a brand manager for my Amazon FBA business and the niche site tied to that, of course, and worked on that. But I sold that business in December of last year, which was a great exit, nice mid 6-figure exit. And the last few months, I've bought a couple of websites, done a number of different things, all sorts of projects that we're working on, and lots more planned for the near future as well. So it's I just think it's kind of cool maybe for people to hear that, yes, you're working for me, you still have a full-time job, but you're able to build this website on the side up to $8,500 a month. It's a nice little side income to have.
It is. And I have a second site that I'm working on too. It's smaller, but traffic is growing on that. It gets around 100,000 page views a month right now. So traffic has been growing. That site's only about a year, maybe 14, 15 months old. Mm-hmm. And so that one's doing well. And I like the growth trajectory. So my content process is solid. I've got writers, I've got editors, I've got all that, those pieces mapped out. But there's probably like another 30 pieces of content ready to go up on that site here in the next couple of weeks. So I'm super hopeful for the trajectory of that one as well. Yeah,
absolutely. And is that the only 2 sites that you have that you're really focusing on?
Yeah. Yes, I've done the shiny new toy. There have been times in the last year where I've either bought a site or acquired a site, and I just honestly, my attention span, like I have a hard enough time focusing on one that and this goes to all your readers, like don't sell yourself thin. Like you don't want to get too thin or spread yourself too thin over different projects. And every time I get the urge to go and buy a site or start something new, I know that I'm not giving my 2 sites that I own the most attention, and given their growth potential, I know the ROI on my time is far better spent just focused on those 2 when I look at the growth potential. So starting more than one site, especially if you're just starting out, is a really bad idea. And if you can settle in on one niche, you're going to be so much better off.
Yep. I agree. If you're doing everything yourself, even if you're outsourcing a lot of it, right? Just one site while you're learning the ropes, getting it to work, growing it. Yeah. I 100% agree with that advice. So in combination, both your sites, what's the total income roughly that you're making the last couple months?
So the last 2 months we broke 5 figures for the first time ever, which is great.
That's a month.
Yeah. in gross revenue, and I think we're set to possibly break 11 this month. So We'll see how it goes. Yeah.
I love it. That is awesome. Seriously, like, and for people listening in, like, I am genuinely super excited that Jason is doing so well. His sites are taking off. And Jake, I think I'm going to sit down and interview Jake as well. His sites are doing extremely well. I love it. I love seeing people have success, but I do have to ask the difficult question now, Jason.
Sure.
If you're making 10 grand a month, why are you working for this guy, Spencer Hawes? Why, what's the deal? Like, should I expect your 2-week notice anytime soon, or? No.
So number one, I have a family so I'm the sole provider of a family of 6, myself included. So I'm married. I have 4 kids. I have 3 dogs. 2 of my dogs are very large and they eat a lot. So they're both 150 pounds, and they sit there and they put down like $100 worth of food in 2 weeks.
It's not cheap.
No, I have bills. But the biggest thing for me is like, I like having 2 income streams, at all times. I wouldn't want to and this is just me, that like, you can make a case for either. It'd be different. If I was a single guy and my bills were $2,000 a month, we might be having a different conversation. As much as I love Niche Pursuits, the Niche Pursuits audience, if I could afford to do it all on my own, that might look like a more attractive option. But right now, I feel like it's my responsibility as a provider of my family. I want to reinvest as much as of my profits as I can back into growing my businesses, and take as little as I can in monthly salary, so that way I can grow them into bigger properties. Like I have a long-term view of my sites. I don't want to sell myself short, just take all the money and live off of it and then have nothing. I want to take 60 to 70% of that revenue that I'm making and go back out and buy more content and grow those sites bigger. So they're bigger authorities in the space. And eventually, maybe a year or two from now, I'll be looking at a much bigger exit. And when I look at a much bigger exit, then you and I might have to have that conversation. So,
and that's totally fine. Like, I know going into this, I've actually encouraged you and everybody I hire. I say, I like that you're entrepreneurial. I want you to be entrepreneurial.
Sure.
I don't expect that you're going to work for me forever. I know the day's going to come. I hope the day comes that you guys are doing so well, we can sort of celebrate together and you can move on to the next phase. I'm totally, fine with that. My story, I had built up my sites. They were making roughly around $10,000 a month while I was still working my corporate job. And that's when I decided to pull the plug. Right. Yeah. I had saved up 6 months of earnings. My sites were making about $10,000 a month. This is back in 2011. I don't know if the difference is that I really wasn't in love with my banking job. I was, I saw that I could be an entrepreneur. I was making good money. I was like, and I cannot go sit in a cubicle all day, trying to get people to open a new business loan or whatever. Right. I was ready to move on. So I don't know if there's a little bit of that there for you, is just like, you know what, you're able to work from home where you're at. You're not too antsy to leave.
Yeah, there's a little bit of that, but there's also the piece. And this is where, like I said, I know you could make the argument any way you want. Like, I'm sure I could do all the stuff on my own and not outsource and just start living off my side income today if I wanted to, because I'd like to think we live somewhat frugally. So we could do that. But the thing that I like is, it's an example of, let's go back and rewind back to February of 2017 when Amazon took the commission cut. Like, I like having two sources of income, because if all of a sudden Amazon chopped my legs out from under me tomorrow, I don't have to worry. Like, I've got another source of income, and it's like, that would stink. Like, I wouldn't like losing income, but at the end of the day, I can still pay all my bills because I've got two sources of income. So that's just my perspective. And I know you can make the case for either or. There are a lot of people who would say, well, you could be, more productive in your own business. That's probably true, but my having two sources of income is more important to me at this point. So I like the security.
I think that makes a lot of sense. So we've talked a little bit about tactics, strategies, how you grew your site. Before we wrap up here, is there any final suggestions or tips, things that have worked really well in your couple of sites that you have now that you wanted to share, or just any words of motivation for people out there?
Yeah, I would tell folks, don't give up. I am a shining example of that. When I first published my first website, I remember sending it to Spencer, and he asked me, he was like, why is the front page of your website, why is the SEO title home? And it's because I literally created my homepage. The homepage was home. It wasn't the brand. It wasn't the name of the site. Like, I didn't know anything. So don't give up. Like, if you're passionate about it, you can learn about it. And I would recommend to folks that are maybe in the intermediate range who, aren't just starting out, try and automate. The sooner you can find processes to automate, that's my biggest weakness, is automation. I'm getting really, really good at the content automation piece. I wish I had gotten it down sooner. And if you can automate, then you can just scale, and it can be hands off at that point. You can have a project manager who can do most of it for you at a decent budget, and it frees up your time to do the more important stuff.
I agree. Great tips, great advice, and super interesting story. I hope that people listening in found it interesting. Of course, I've known your story all along, but I thought it was important to sit down with you and just talk about your journey, because there's a lot of interesting stories out there that we don't often get to hear. And so it's been great being able to sit down with you, Jason, and hear your journey to making, over $10,000 a month with your website. That's huge.
Yeah, man, I'm excited. I'm excited for the growth. And honestly, a big shout out to you. Like, I wouldn't have even thought it was possible if I hadn't have stumbled onto your blog. So there's a, piece of that success that I definitely owe to following you. And I'm super excited about the growth potential. And I would just encourage anybody that's on the fence, that's like, can I really make money online? Just start a site, try it. If you fail, who cares? Like, it's a learning experience.
Absolutely. Great advice, great tips, and thank you for the kind words. I appreciate it. So
you bet.
Thank you everybody for listening in. And if you want to keep following along with Jason and I, go over to nichepursuits.com. Thanks a lot. As a reminder, if you want to learn more about how you can get training from myself and Jason, as well as Jake, you can go to nichepursuits.com/training. Again, that's nichepursuits.com/training. I will be shortly releasing a new training course that teaches you how to rank your website in Google, get that great organic traffic, and the specific tactics that we have used for a long time that work really well. So I hope to see you there. Thanks a lot.